Good morning. Okay, I think we have a few participants already, so we'll start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, An Introduction to Research in Creative Arts Practice. Before we start, let me go through a few items and remind everyone, if you have any questions for our speakers, feel free to type it in our chat box below. We'll have a separate time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. Also, a recorded version of this webinar will be available. The link will be shared later on. We will also have a gallery photo at the end of the session, so please do join and have your camera on. Okay, now let me present our speaker for today. He is Jeric Garcia. Sir Jeric is currently a faculty member of the Multimedia Arts Program and the New Media Cluster Research Coordinator. He is a photographer, a graphic artist, and a visual artist. He was a former advertising director and magazine editor-in-chief. He completed his undergraduate degree at the Ateneo de Manila and his Master's of Fine Arts at the University of the Philippines. Thank you for being here, Sir Jeric, and we are very excited to learn from you today.
Thank you, Ms. Jingay. I guess, hello, everybody. So I guess I have, let's just get into it so we can makarami tayo.
Go ahead, sir.
There we go. All right, so at any point that, my signal or my presentation becomes choppy, laggy, or whatever, I hope you let me know so we can, we can adjust. All right, so good morning. So today, like I said, like Ms. Jingay said, this is a webinar where I'm supposed to talk to you about the research in creative arts practice. Right? So we'll have 4 parts. Oops, so the webinar today will have 4 parts, beginning with a discussion on what research is, and then we move on to a discussion on research in the creative arts. And I'll show you a case study. This is I'm showing you essentially my Mfa thesis, which is the draw-negative process, which is a new way actually of creating photographs. It's a cameraless way of creating photographs. And then finally, maybe something useful for everybody is, a few tips about, on how to create, how to propose a topic, a research topic in the creative arts. All right, so all right. So a lot of people actually get confused when they are asked about research. A lot of people have a lot of assumptions about what research is. Most of those assumptions have been passed on to them by other people, and generally most of those assumptions are actually medyo may kulang, not really wrong, but lacking in some parts. So to figure out what research is, let's look at first what research isn't. Right? So number 1, research isn't a simple Google search. You have a lot of people, for example, in social media, na parang na-research ko yan, dito, ganito. But essentially, all they did was really to do a simple Google search. So that is not research. That is looking up things on Google. Okay, not research. Research also isn't randomly gathering information. Right? So, again, link to number 1, na parang, sige, let's search for something on Google. And a list comes up and you just pick whatever the first top 3. That is also not research. That is still looking up things on Google. Right? Rearranging facts is also not research. Right? So let's say you have again you have a collection of facts already, and then you're going to rearrange them so that the last one is now the first one, and etc. Or the one on the left is on the right. Hindi rin research yun. Right? Neither is summarizing facts, creating a list of the things you've researched, and then that's also not research. And definitely, finally, what is not research is combining materials from different sources without intervention. By intervention, I mean, what did you do after you got all these facts? Did you just pass it on as something that is supposed to be yours, but it's actually not? Now we're going to plagiarism. Okay, so again, definitely not research, especially plagiarism. Plagiarism is not research. So what is research? Right. Let's go with a few dictionary definitions of research, the long definitions. First of all, so research is a systematic inquiry, meaning there is a method to the research. There are steps to the research. Research is a process, essentially. And the objective of that process is to contribute or develop public knowledge and understanding. It's very important, yung public knowledge, which means that essentially what everybody knows about a certain topic. Right? Research, again, another definition is an investigation or an experimentation to discover and interpret facts. So not just finding out about something, it's about really also figuring out what it means to you or to other people, right? And the purpose of this is really to revise accepted theories or laws, because again, things change over time. Right? So what we knew, let's say 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, based on what we know now about that same topic, may be completely different. Huwag tayong lumayo ng 5 years, di ba? A year ago, we didn't know anything about COVID. And ngayon, we have so much data on it that it has actually debunked a lot of initial assumptions that we had about COVID and SARS-CoV-2, right? So we discover and interpret facts to revise existing knowledge and to actually use this new knowledge in practical applications. Okay? So the definition of research really is in the word itself. It says research, meaning that you search again. And this is where research really, I think, comes in as an activity that you look at information that is already there, and then you figure out, are there gaps in that information? Okay. Was something overlooked, or yung previous researchers, did they not have the technology that we have now? Diba? So again, it's always looking at information with fresh eyes, to see if anything was missed or overlooked. This is but I think this is the simplest and I think most fun definition of research. It is formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with purpose. Formalized because again, there's a structure to it, but really it's just you're not just randomly unearthing stuff, randomly going here and looking. You're actually not looking, you're seeing. And there's a big difference. Okay, so it is formalized curiosity. It is poking and prying with purpose. Okay. So the next question now is, isn't research only for the sciences? Right? The short answer is no. It is typically associated with the sciences because the sciences do actually a lot of research. And then even in media, when we need to depict researchers, there are usually always people in lab coats. And so yun yung association. Again, it's a media induced association, right? That research is just for the sciences. Another reason that we normally associate research with the sciences is because when we again take science courses, diba, laging dinadrop ang research or the word research. in our everyday classes, in our creative classes, we don't really say, use research. And sometimes parang we don't like using research, or we feel that research is something that you don't use with creative pursuits. So ngayon pa lang, I want to debunk that. Right? And I want you all to think, to stop thinking that what we do in design, in art, in fashion, is not research. When we again systematically look for something to help us in our work, in our practice, that is research. Right? It is not just for the sciences. All right. So I guess we waiting for my slide to load. Which brings us now to again creative practice itself. Right. So what does research have to do with our work as designers, as artists, as creative people in general? So this leads to two types of research that I want to introduce to you today. And these are practice-led and practice-based research. All right, so together, these two types of research are called practice-related research. Essentially because this is research that is related to what we do, what we practice. Right? So these are two types of research, again, related to practice, but their outcomes, their objectives are slightly different. So let's start with practice-led research. So practice-led research is essentially any research that leads to a new understanding of creative arts practice. Right? So any research that helps us understand what we do better can be considered practice-led research. The objective, the concern of practice-led research is the nature of our practice. How do we do things? Ano nga ba yung parang, let's say in photography, how do you take a photograph, or how is a photograph created anyway? Right. So these are things that you want to know. Right. The aim of practice-led research is to advance knowledge about our practice, whatever it is that you're, whatever art form you're practicing, or advance knowledge within the practice. So inside the practice, what else don't we know about our own crafts? It's very interesting because a lot of people would think that we know everything that we need to know, but that is actually not true. Right? So we'll get to that later. All right. So practice-based research, on the other hand, is more what we're trying to advocate for you guys and for everybody else, actually, I think, in the School of Design and Art. If practice-led research is concerned with the nature of creative arts practice, is concerned about the objective is to lead people into a new understanding of creative arts practice. Practice-based research also does that, except that in practice-based research, we actually need to create a creative object. Okay, kailangan natin magbuo ng isang creative artifact, and that artifact that we created will be the basis for our new understanding about our practice. So it's not just, and this is essentially the key difference between practice-led and practice-based research, because essentially both lead to a new understanding of our practice. But with practice-led research, you are not required to make anything. You're not required to essentially come up with an outcome or an output from your research. So practice-based research is concerned beyond the nature of creative arts practice. Ano yung products of that nature? Right? So the objective of practice-based research is to advance knowledge through practice, through doing what we do. That's where we find out. Because with practice-led, we, as a researcher in the creative arts, and you're doing practice-led research, pwede kasing mag-observe ka lang, diba? And you actually look at what other people are doing, and then make conclusions from that. With practice-based research, we are not just researchers; we're actually also practitioners. Diba? We practice, we put into action whatever it is that we find out, and we use it to prove whatever it is that we need to prove. The thing to remember about, the thing to be conscious about is that we're not the only ones using the terms practice-based and practice-led. Practice-based is actually used also in health research, but the way they use it is actually mas similar to practice-led. So when a nurse or a doctor or any technologist uses practice-based, they actually mean practice-led. So they're not really creating anything. Okay. So there's another distinction that I want to make about practice-based research and just pure practice, right? Because a lot of you may be thinking, well, I find out things about what I do on a daily basis. I figure out things about what I do on a daily basis. Isn't that already research? And the answer is no, right? So research in the context of pure practice, our day-to-day, doing things, fulfills our goals, our individual goals as artists. The goals of our individual practice. So here, the artist is actually just a practitioner, not really a researcher. But we go through the same motions, but we really can't consider ourselves researching or practicing practice-based research. The difference really between research in daily practice and practice-based research is that the objective of practice-based research is really to add to the collective knowledge about what we do, right? So this is, I like to always say, what are you adding to the conversation about, multimedia arts, or about illustration, or about fashion design? Because there is an existing conversation, and when we're talking about conversations, it's not talking to yourself; it's talking to other practitioners of the craft, diba? Sharing thoughts, sharing ideas, and in that conversation, am I just repeating things, or am I really adding something? Something new, something that hasn't really been discussed or put on the table before. So that is essentially the difference between these two things, right? So given this, practice-based research requires, number one, a documentation of your research process. So we all take photographs of what we do and we post it on the gram. But here, really, it's more intentional. I am taking a photo of this step of my process because, again, I need to share it with somebody later on, right? And do we answer the questions now or maybe later? Let's hold off questions for later.
Yes, we'll have it later.
So practice-based, okay. So practice-based research also requires a textual analysis or an explanation that supports the research that you're trying to do, diba? And demonstrates your critical reflection. So here again, you are by textual analysis, we're looking at again, looking for what has already been written on what we're trying to do, okay? And that using what has been written before or what has been done before to actually support what we're trying to do now. Right? And here's again, going back to the differences, you will see that this actually requires our critical reflection. If we're really asking, is this all? Is this everything? Is this all that I can do with this practice? Again, as a photographer, my concern was, is this everything? Is this everything I can photograph? Or is this everything that is this the only way I can photograph things? So that begins the inquiry, as it may, that leads to practice-based research. So finally, practice-based research, again, because it is research, a formal inquiry, a formal form of curiosity. It needs a structure, right? And that structure, it needs a structure. It needs to have, again, a physical manifestation. Whether it's, again, in practice-based research, it's an artifact, diba? And the point there is, again, in the interest of adding to the conversation, other artist researchers can actually verify that or challenge that. By challenge, we mean the haters lang. It's really just, does it really work? Can I duplicate it? Diba? And this is where, the scientific method comes in. It goes back to, again, the science. Diba? Anything that is proven can be duplicated. Unless it can be duplicated kahit once, then it remains a theory, diba? Not a fact, not a law. Okay. So now maybe you're thinking now, okay, so all right, so I have to look at my practice and I have to research about my practice. But what essentially can I research about my practice? Well, there are 5 components in every creative practice. Basic components. Of course, there could be more. First is the medium of the practice. So what is the medium? In the visual arts, definitely this is either you paint, or if you paint in oil, you paint in watercolor, or it's photography. So again, what is the medium that you are practicing? And that could be a source of inquiry. Second, method. So again, how do I make what I make? Right? What things? What are the components of the process that makes what I make? Third would be materials. What do I use in this process, in this medium? Can I use materials used in other mediums for my medium? Same with methods. Can I use methods used in other mediums for my own medium? Right? The subject is also a component of creative practice, because when we make something, it's usually for something or about something. So we can actually think about for example, my MFA thesis was about mythical subjects, right? Which are, if you think about it, impossible to photograph because they're mythical, right? They don't really exist, right? And then finally, this may be something. This is kind of not completely. It depends on which practice you have. Because for us, for example, in the applied arts, the audience is important, right? Because again, we're not really creating something for the sake of creating something. But when we create designs, it's usually for somebody. When we create a communication, it's usually because somebody needs to hear it. In the visual arts, it's a little different because audience is optional. If you think about it, unless you're selling, your artworks. The objective of visual art is really just to express. That's it. If I make something and I express it, whatever I'm feeling, I express it through an object, a sculpture, a painting, whatever else, that's done. There's no need for an audience. There's a need for an audience, when you say I want to sell this art to somebody, that's when the audience comes in, right? All right, so here we go. So let me take you through what is actually still my MFA thesis. So this is a practice-based research in photography. Essentially, what is? So let me show you. So this is the exhibition poster for my MFA thesis. So it's called Traces of the Real, and it's a photographic reconciliation of history and myth. Because again, these history and myth, totally opposites, right? History exists, it's real, it's tangible. Myth, no, the opposite of that. So photography can only take photographs of what is tangible, di ba? Because if it's not there, if it's not in front of the camera, you can't take a photo of it. Di ba? That's why you can't photograph air, because there's nothing tangible in front of the camera. But air is historical, so di ba? So how do you, di ba? So that was it. That was essentially my inquiry. And this is something that I must actually stress. In the creative arts, we don't usually use the word problem, right? Ni research problem siya. We actually should use the word inquiry because we're inquiring about something, problematizing about something. Because if it is about curiosity, then it should be about inquiry. What do we want to know? And these are essentially two things that I wanted to know when I began my Mfa thesis. Can you create photographs without a camera? And then the more difficult inquiry was, how do you make photographs of unphotographable subjects? Is it even possible to create photographs of unphotographable subjects? Right? And this is something also that I think everybody should take note of. When you're doing research, you're not doing it na meron ka ng tapos na gawa. Alright? So you're doing it because, again, you don't know, and you need to go through a process to find out, the answer to that inquiry. So these were, of course, it's more convoluted, but these are, in simple terms, ito yung gusto kong malaman during my research. Essentially, what I wanted to know was, how can I transform a photograph like this into a photograph like this? Or this? Or this? Okay. So, let me just make it clear that you are actually the nauna pa kayo sa MMA to see these images, because I'm supposed to present it to them. They haven't seen it yet. So nauna passion decided that. So that is it. That's it. Can I do it? Of course, I was able to do it because there are these artifacts already. But at that point, I didn't know. I actually didn't know what they were going to look like when I was beginning. I just knew that, again, I had to take photography from from how we know it into something else. Okay. So again, after the inquiry, definitely you have to, again, ask yourself, so this is what I want to do. Have other people done it before? And what are the artifacts of their process? So to the first question, can you take photographs without a camera? The answer to that is yes, actually. Man Ray, I don't know if you're familiar with photograms, or as Man Ray called them, rayographs. Man Ray had actually done these photographs. Created these photographs in 1922, right? And they did not use any cameras. So what happened here was, if you're familiar with photograms, what happens is, you actually take an object and you put it on top of a photosensitive surface and you expose it to light. Right? So depending on the object, depending on the opacity of the object, of course, if the object is opaque, like for example the scissor handles, they're not going to transmit light, and so they're going to come, they're going to look white on a negative. If it is translucent, definitely it's going to show some light, and then it's going to actually create those images like there, or you leave on the image on the right. And transparent images will not leave any image because the light goes through them. So all the transparent parts of these two images are the ones in black. So yes, you can create photographs without a camera. Here's another one. Anna Atkins, again, was creating cyanotypes. So cyanotypes are a well, it's a printmaking technique, but the principles used in cyanotypes are similar to what Man Ray used in his rayographs. You have a photosensitive surface, you put something on top of that surface, you expose it to light, and an image forms. So yun. But what really led me to my process, what really was very critical really this work really pushed me to think about my work in what it is now. So Hiroshi Bimoto, who is a Japanese photographer, created lightning fields in 2009. So I did not know about this work until I think 2015. I was in Seoul. I had a trip to Seoul. I decided, I saw that I was familiar with Sugimoto's work, and I saw that he was being exhibited at the Samsung Leung Museum in Seoul, and then I went, and then I saw these. These are monumental. I mean, really floor to ceiling images ito, and you approach them, and then you think that para siyang it's like, are they trees? Are they the screen doesn't give it justice. Yung mga branches na yan, behind that is parang a more subtle pattern. Nakala mo grass. Really, so when I saw lightning fields, I thought it was really a photograph of lightning in a field. That is actually not true. So Sugimoto did take photographs of lightning striking a grassy field. What he did was, he took a Tesla coil generator, a static electricity generator, and then punched undeveloped negatives with it. Right. So that's what he did. He essentially created a photograph without even touching the negative. So that's where I figured, okay, so I can actually create photographs by directly manipulating a film negative, because he did it. And so, my task now, again, I can, if I'm going to do the same thing, and then I'm not adding anything to the conversation, right? So I had to figure out a way to, essentially do what he has done, which is, essentially create an image directly onto a negative without a camera. Right. So that sort of confirmed to me that it can be done. The second inquiry was that can you actually create images of unphotographable subjects? Right. And the answer to that, again, reviewing previous works, came with this photograph. So this is by Andreas Gursky. It's titled Review. It was created in 2015. And this essentially shows Angela Merkel, who is still, I think, who was the Chancellor of Germany, sitting in front of this window, it seems, with her three predecessors. Okay. So it looks like a photograph. It looks like, something that you could actually photograph, with a camera. Except that this never happened. This image technically does not exist. Not really. This image exists, but this situation where Merkel was actually sitting with these three gentlemen did not happen. And yet here it is in a photograph, right? So Gursky is actually known for this kind of work. So this is the Rhine 2, which he made in 1999. This, if I remember correctly, held the record of the most expensive photograph ever sold. I can't remember the figures now. So, but this is, again, a photograph of the Rhine River, Germany. And if you think about it, Gursky was actually probably across on one side, and he was photographing, all the way to the other side. Except again, this exists, the Rhine exists, this spot exists along the Rhine River. But this situation where this spot itself, this phenomenon, this moment does not exist. And yet here it is. We have a photograph of this scene. So how, well, so Gursky, how Gursky did this was he manipulated the images. He took several, so this is not just one image. Ang process ni Gursky is he actually takes, a lot of images of a scene and then assembles them digitally. Right? So it is an impossible photograph in the sense that, it never happened. Kumbaga, this scene never happened. But it is also true. It is also, it is real because there is a photograph. Diba? Pics, or it didn't happen, right? Oh, here's a pic. All right. So to confirm na sa akin, reviewing all of these confirmed to me that it can be done. Right? But now the question for me is, how can I do it? Diba? What alternative tools, and this was my question now, what alternative tools and techniques can I use to make impossible photographs that will continue to satisfy the irreducibles of photography? Now, yung big words. Let's simplify things. When we talk about irreducibles of photography or any craft for that matter, what is it about your practice? Natanggalin mo na lahat, it'll still be that object or that practice. I think in the, in previous conversation with the machine guy, I was asking, so, what are the irreducibles of a skirt or a pair of pants? Right. So how do you know, when you make a skirt, how can you claim it's still a skirt and not a pair of pants? What should be there for it to be a skirt and not a pair of pants, and vice versa? So for photography, well, it's actually hidden. The irreducibles of photography are actually hidden in the definition of photography. So photography is the production of images through the action of light upon a photosensitive surface over time. That's all photography is. And so the irreducibles would be light, photosensitive surface, and time. Right. If I have these three, I can make a photograph. It can be a photograph. Right. In Gursky's photographs, there was light, there was a photosensitive surface, and there was time. Diba? And binarecord the image. Right. So at some, it has to be there. Okay. So I was able, again, using the language of research, I was able to actually create this, essentially a conceptual framework of what I wanted to do. Diba? So the direct relationship is between light and the image. So the image is the dependent variable, and light is the independent variable. And so again, this is what photography creates, diba? An image created by light. And then you had your moderator variables. So moderator variables are variables that affect the image, that affect the dependent variable, but are not affected by the independent variable. So the image is dependent on the subject. So the choice of subject actually affects the image. But the subject is not affected by light. Diba? Right? Anong ilaw mo dyan, ganun pa rin. Diba? If it is a historical subject or a mythical subject, if you light it up with using whatever light you have, it is still going to be historical or mythical. Yeah. So moderator variable siya. The mediator variable naman, on the other hand, is a variable that affects the dependent variable, but is also affected by the independent variable. Right? So here we have the method. So definitely what the a conventional method, camera and lens, will actually affect the kind of image that you produce. It will create a photograph, right? And then light also affects the method, because again, it's exposure. It controls the exposure of exposure settings of a camera if I'm using a camera. Or it's going to also use affect how thin or thick the lines are going to be if I'm going to use alternative purposes, right? So here are my prototypes. Okay, so the idea was, so again, I did not want to use cameras and lenses, but I needed to create a situation where something blocking the light actually creates a photograph. And of course, I needed to produce a negative. And then again, I know that I can directly manipulate a negative to create an image. And so this was one of my prototypes. So yeah, so obviously the technique, the process that I'm taking into photography is drawing. So I'm creating an image through drawing, and I'm creating a negative through drawing. So this was it. This was my initial my prototype. So proof of concept, I can actually do that. And then I needed to tweak it because if you notice in this prototype, I used a lot of lines. So lines don't exist in a photograph, right? So ito mukha pa rin siyang drawing. Right? So I decided that, I'm going, instead of just creating lines that are, again, very sharp lines, I'm going to create gradient transitions by essentially rubbing the edges to create more. Yeah, for example, here now we see, di ba, mas may transition na ngayon, just like how it would probably look like in a photograph. So these are the prototypes that actually presented during my proposal defense. So through these, again, this is proof of concept. It can happen. But where I want to take this, it's going to produce something. Right? So over time, I figured that the one of the, again, the concern about the gradients, I can actually use graphite to do that, because graphite, actually I ended up using graphite, charcoal, India ink, and what else did I use? Printer's ink, which is an oil-based ink, and all of these other techniques, like for example, shading, stippling, and all of that. So I incorporated that into my process. And here is one of the finished negatives. It's a negative. A negative, as as anybody would actually see, who is familiar with the photographic negative, can see as a negative. And so here, so the images, so the photography program of SDA helped me. So I did this in our photo lab. So this is exposing the photo paper, really like a darkroom process, and then producing the final photograph. So again, you have a photograph. It's not a drawing because it wasn't made using drawing techniques. The negative was made using drawing techniques, but the final output is a photograph because it was created using photographic techniques. So I satisfied the irreducibles, the requirement of the irreducibles, which was to use light, to use photosensitive surface, and to use time to create an image. So this was how it was exhibited at the College of Fine Arts in UP in 2019. So the the light tables in front of the images contained the negatives. So you actually looked at the negatives and you looked at the images, and actually what you could do is you could take your phone and invert your phone and look at the negatives with your phone. So magiging positive siya. And then you can point your phone at the prints, and then magiging negative siya. And so then there's a conversation now between the negative and the positive. So this is one wall. And so, there are a few classes who came to visit. There was a classes in anthropology, because I had, I touched on myth, definitely. So, that falls into the scope of anthropology. Of course, there were fine arts classes. There were a few masters in anthropology classes. I was really proud of this because, first of all, well, to date, nobody has done this. To date, this process, again, if you're thinking about an original process in the 21st century, this would be considered an original process. Nobody has done what I have actually been able to do with this process. All right, so the final output was 17 impossible portraits. Right. So this was the first set. I categorized them type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. And I only use those names because type 1 was the first process that I actually finished, produced. Type 2, the second, etc., etc., etc. So this is a type 2 negative. Okay? And this was made, again, with graphite, with ink, and with, just the usual drawing techniques. This was type 1. Actually, this was the very first method that I came up with. And this used, stippling techniques. And I wanted to use stippling techniques because, it reminded me of grain in a photograph. And so I used that to create the images. So there's no straight line here. It's all dots. This is a type 3 negative, well, a type 3 image from a type 3 negative. And so I used printmaking techniques here. So essentially, it's a kind of image transfer technique to create these images. The type 4, all right. So you're probably asking, I didn't include the type 4. You're probably asking, but sir, they're all drawings. So they're not like photography where, you actually captured them from life. The type 4 negative is something I did directly. I mean, really, I had a transparent sheet, and I drew from life. I had my father sit in front of me, and then I made a photograph of him through drawing. So I did not need a camera anymore because I am the camera. And then created these images. These are, again, so these are the same images. So all these images, if you want to know, the people here are all World War II veterans. So this is actually related to my previous work. So in 2009, I went around the Philippines to create a collection of portraits of surviving World War II veterans. And the reason for that was that at that time, so if you're not familiar, all of these lolos fought during World War II. And when they were fighting the Japanese in World War II, we were still an American colony. And so essentially, we were Americans, right? So dapat, after the war, kasama tayo doon sa benefits ng mga American soldiers. But after the war, in 1946, we became independent. Actually, it began in the 1930s, when we became a Commonwealth. And the whole point there was to eventually make us an independent nation. So after the war, hindi binigyan ng benefits ang mga grandfathers natin. They weren't given proper war benefits. So ang dami sa kanila, were living in poverty. These were heroes. Diba? We're here now. We're enjoying whatever democracy it is that we have now because these people fought for it. So I looked for them, and then I exhibited those photographs in Hawaii. In time for yung announcement, again, when I was making them, I didn't know this was going to happen. But Obama eventually signed into law that nabibigyan na sila ng kanilang benefits. So that was in 2009. And so my problem, again, this is now a problem. This is now an inquiry about a previous work, was that how can I actually, because when I was taking photographs of them, they weren't really wearing the uniforms. Diba? They weren't wearing the uniforms. Sira na yung mga uniforms nila. And so almost all the images that I made were of old people. Diba? Na parang paano lang yung heroes yan. And so that was the myth now, the myth part of the images. How do I bring that part into the images so that you get it here? Parang you have a photograph which actually shows, these fine gentlemen as the heroes that they are, diba? Which is not captured in the earlier, in the 2009 images. So dami yun. So now there are all these applications, I guess, of this technique. I'm thinking next, diba, para how can I actually decolonize the images that have been taken of Filipinos ng mga again of white photographers. Diba? The white gaze. How can I decolonize the white gaze in old photographs? So with this technique, I can do that. So I didn't just, here's the thing. So I didn't just actually create images of our grandfathers. I had two special images because again, the idea that I wanted to create for these images was that I wanted to question heroism also, diba? The nature of heroism, the nature of heroes. And I wanted, because again, now I have a method for really constructing images that are real, but not real at the same time. So parang yun. So I looked at other things. I looked at other. I don't know if you recognize the people in the photograph. So on the left is Senator Trillanes, and on the right is Senator Gringo Honasan. And the title of this work was Insurrectos. And if you notice, the Trillanes, I chose to depict him as he is at his age at the time that this was made. But I decided to depict Gringo. I decided to use an older image of Gringo because when he was again leading the coups in the early 80s, that's when people saw him as a hero. But now, diba, the older Gringo, nobody thinks of Gringo now as a hero. Here's I think that the more interesting image is this. So does anybody recognize the ladies in the photograph? So the lady on the left, on the right, is actually, yes, Jed. The lady on the right is Senator Miriam, and the lady on the left is Senator Miriam. So the lady on the left, this was an image of her when she was commissioner ng immigration. Diba? Again, when she was a hero, she was considered a hero. And the image on the right is now where, diba, medyo, especially now, with her associations with Bongbong, medyo questionable na ngayon yung hero status niya. So again, all of this never happened. Miriam did not dress up like this ever and had her photograph taken like this ever. But these are all photographs. These are, kumbaga yun, the basis photographs sila lahat. So these were from real photographs. All right, so for you now, how do you now move on to, again, from proposing your own creative arts research topic? So in a research proposal, there are three core elements of a research proposal in order for it to be successful. First, you must identify that the research is worthwhile. What that means is that again, it contributes to the current knowledge about what you're trying to research on, and it develops good creative practice. I mean, really improves practice. The research, of course, must also be feasible, meaning it can be accomplished and delivered on time. Diba? Kasi you have only what, 2 terms? I don't know, 2 terms of capstone. It's something that it can be achieved given the available time and resources and the experience and expertise of the researcher. You must be able to do this. You must be able to do this yourself. You have, may kakayanan ka to really create it. And definitely, it is ethical and legal. Right? We're trying to now, one of the things that is happening in terms of research at BNILD is that we're trying to now create our own ethical research ethics board to really safeguard the ethics and the legality of research, to make sure that nobody is vulnerable, nobody is taken advantage of, etc., etc., etc. And next, maybe this could be to me, this is very important. Your research purpose and value must be communicated effectively. You must be able to tell people, hey, kailangan natin itong gawin. Kailangan niyo akong payagan gawin to. And I'm doing this because, again, it is worthwhile, it is feasible, and not because kailangan kong graduate. Di ba? When you tell, kahit sa MMA, ba't ko ginagawa to? Kasi sir, gusto ko na graduate. Not a good enough reason. All right, so you can begin by creating a research profile, and there are 2 ways to do that. The first way to do that is really to just identify the intent of your study, meaning ano yung topic nyo, what is the area of practice that your topic is going to be located in, and anong field of study. Okay? And then what is your inquiry process? What research traditions will you use? Is it going to be, well, definitely it's going to be practice-based, but is it going to be ethnography and all of those other traditions? And then what genre of research is it going to be in? This could be discussed in more detail by your advisors. Then what are your proposed methods, and what is your worldview? Why are you doing this? That's something that's also I think very important when you do your research. You have to ask yourself, why? What about this? What about me? Led me to this? So this is one way of creating a profile. The other way of creating a profile is to actually do it the more manuscript way of creating a profile, which is ano yung title of the study, what is your background, what is the intent. What, again, tradition, genre, your research questions, your procedures, they're all here. Both profiles will give you material to create a final document, or at least guide your practice when you're doing your practice-based research. I find that, well, for me anyway, I like this one better because this saves me the writing later on. So I already write it out. Okay, my thoughts. I actually use it on. I actually use index cards. Oh, it's not showing up. But I actually use index cards to write this out. So yun. Okay. Regarding the aims of your research, there are 5 aims that you can actually think about. Are you doing the research to depict something? Are you doing the research to expound or describe a process? Is your research going to show the effect of something? Are you developing something? This was for the draw negative. This was my this was my aim, to develop a new way of creating photographs. And are you analyzing something? There could be more actually, but you can start with these, right? One thing also to consider is ano yung pillars ng research pillars ng program. So these are, I'm not familiar with the research pillars of FDM and the Mfa cluster, but these are our pillars at NMC. We have practice, so we can do research that is, again, practice-based or practice-led. So it is about what we do. We can do research about the technology that we use in our practice. We can do research about culture, the culture that where our practice resides, or the culture that uses the work, the objects that we create. And this may be for teachers. We can research about the pedagogy. How do we teach the subjects we teach? Or how do the students in NMC learn? So these are, you can align your research with the pillars of your own programs. All right. So let me wrap this all up by something that, so here's a great example of practice-based research within your field of expertise. So I don't know if you've heard of this. This is biofabrication. This is Suzanne Lee. Suzanne Lee is a fashion designer who has, I'll let you read her statement. This is from her TED Talk. Okay. So, my own journey in biofabrication started with a project called Bioculture. The provocation that was that instead of growing a plant like cotton in the field for over several months, you can actually grow microbes to use to grow a similar cellulose material in a few days. So you're using microbes to create material for fabric that you can actually use to make garments, shoes, bags. So this impacts definitely production of, again, materials for clothes. This impacts costs. This impacts, again, the sustainability of practice, because a lot of people, most research now is yan yung focus, about sustainability. Can we actually sustain our creative practice based on what we're using now? For photography, definitely bilang ng araw ng film photography, unless the industry can actually come up with a more green version of chemicals that we use to create film, to create photographs in a more traditional, more conventional way. So so this is essentially a garment made from these cellulose fibers made by these microbes. So you have a crossing between microbiology and fashion. And I love I actually, me personally, I like it when two previously unrelated things come together. And that is actually my definition of creativity. When I tell my students, so how is that creative? And I ask them to tell me what are the two previously unrelated things that you've actually put together to make that. And that is what creativity is all about. And that is what we, through practice-based research, essentially want to discover and find out for ourselves and for everybody else who benefits from what we do and what we make. And that's it. Did I overtime na ba ako?
We still have a few minutes, sir, for question and answer. Thank you very much, Sir Jeric. It was really very insightful. We're now going to begin answering questions. We have one on the chat box. Let me read it.
Yeah.
It is from Sasa. Her question is, what are the distinguishable characteristics of practice-led and practice-based research from qualitative and quantitative research? Or are they interchangeable? That's her question.
Okay. So again, like, di ba, kaya nga na sinabi natin, the practice led and practice based at the beginning is the same. Because again, what you want to know, you want to find out something that essentially moves, improves what we do. But with practice led, you're not required to create something. So practice led could just be I observe what weavers and what they do, and then make conclusions based on my observations. Pero pag practice based, kailangan mo ikaw mismo ang mag-weave. Diba? Yun yung number one difference. In terms of qualitative and quantitative, so practice-based typically is more qualitative. Diba? Mas qualitative ang practice-based because you're trying to figure out, parang yung nuances. It's not a number of things. It's about how you make things. Because with qualitative research, you're asking, so how many people actually do it this way? Diba? Yun siya. So the number sort of validates your findings. Ito, yun, when you're doing it yourself, diba, it's more qualitative because parang I think one important thing here is that part of the research also involves your experience, your feelings, your thoughts, yun kailangan i-record. When you're doing something, what comes to your mind, or what is this really for? Yun. I hope that did I answer that? Sasa, did you get that?
Yes, sir. I think really clearly it really means that, and it's very applicable to fashion because it means it's there's an output. So for us, it really is a collection. That's why it's merging two subjects like myself and FM Commu, which is the research writing. Okay, we have a couple of questions, but let me just get the ones who are raising their hand. First, I saw Dars. Dars, what's your question?
Hi, sir. Good afternoon po.
Hello, Dars.
Hello po. Question is, who should we owe or dedicate our research to? Like, it could be to yourself or to our nation or to the environment. Like, this need to align our values or ethos, or does it need to challenge our beliefs? Like, could it be personal or something like that? So, thank you po.
Alam mo, definitely it has to be personal. I feel that, especially, again, this is not just, research that is disconnected from us. This is research that we do on what we do, on what we create. So definitely it has to be personal. So again, for me, it was very personal. For yung reasons ko. Okay. Beyond that, yun medyo questionable. Parang for the country, medyo masyado siyang lofty for me. So I try to avoid, being so lofty. Parang one of my mentors actually, may favorite kwento siya. May mga students daw siya na tinanong, bakit gusto mo maging artist? Sabi ng student, I want to change the world. Sabi niya doon sa artist, hipokrito. You want to change the world? Magpakain ka ng mga mahihirap. Huwag ka maging artist. Diba? So, I would say that if you're doing anything for your research, start with just you and your concerns and your experiences. Diba? Eventually, I guess if the research is big enough or, again, groundbreaking enough, wow, it's kakalat siya talaga. It'll become viral. But don't strive for virality, strive for authenticity. That's what I always say. It has to be authentic more than anything. If it's true to what you think your practice should be about, or how you think, again, fabric or whatever it is that's about your practice is, this should be what it is, and you believe it. Na yun talaga, go for it. That's what you focus on.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
Okay, next one, let me read this from Nathan Claudio. How do you know when your research topic is the right topic for you so that we can avoid last-minute decisions? Very helpful, sir. Good
Ayan,
questions,
yes.
Nathan, for our class.
First of all, I think, again, it has to come from something in you. It has to come from a concern you have. A concern na yung talaga hindi ka papatulugin. And yung concern na, again, hindi related sa kailangan kong graduate. Because you have to see, again, for us it's very important because after you graduate anyway, you will still be making what you're making. Diba? So that should be the concern that you should have. What is it that you want? What is the future? What is the vision you want to have? What is your vision for yourself after you leave the school? What is the practice that what do you want to be known for? And so that should be the primary motivating thing when you're doing research. And yun, again, very important then to actually really look at who. Yun eh. Para kasi a lot of artists are misled by the thought na nag-iisa ako dito, and that's not true. Somebody before you made other things. We're actually here. We're doing what we're doing now because somebody else has done it before. Diba? We're wearing technical fabrics and not makatin na cotton or wool because somebody has figured out a way to essentially create more humane fabrics and stuff like that. So yeah, so I guess it's that. I guess it's think again, go back to yourself, go back to your surroundings, go back to what other people are doing in the same space that you're doing. That's what creates a very interesting research and research topics.
And also, sir, just to add to what you said, I think it's great that when you're looking at other people's work and challenging it because it also reduces the part of plagiarism and intellectual property issues because if it's something that you really are researching and documenting about, even for someone who's not as educated and would say that, oh, that's very, like for instance in fashion, oh, that's very much like the work of Margiela, right? But if you cite
Yes.
that it is something that you're looking into the research of that, then and you're breaking an idea, it also that's your point of view, your query growing up that I'm a very big fan of this designer and I want to break that idea. How come this is his thought process? My thought process is, and through his research, I want to add more. That's pretty much what you were really saying about what research is. So when people are questioning you, oh, that's very Margiela, because that's where it came from. Like when you were doing your photography, I saw that, even the first few samples of how photography was done was actually cited so that when people are questioning you, it is part of the research. And this is where my, how would I say it? This is where my narrative starts from a conversation that has happened since, 18 something, at least that's how I took it. Right, sir?
Correct, ma'am. Right.
Yes.
I think that's it. I think research is a conversation. It's a conversation with the past. It's a conversation with the future. It's a conversation with other people in the present. That's what it is. A lot of people think na kasi na, again, it's an isolated thing, di ba? I-research ako tungkol dito. For what? Di ba? It's a conversation. It's a love letter, really. It's a love letter to your idols. It's a love letter to your, di ba? At saka yun din, ma'am. A note on plagiarism lang. Kasi plagiarism is actually easier to sort out in literature or in written works. Tayo kasi as when we make visual objects, an homage, di ba? Yun eh, para bang that could be plagiarism or appropriation or heaven forbid, di ba? Misappropriation. Pero as long as you know why you're doing it, again, as long as it's a love letter, di ba? Ano ka dyan? Hindi ka, you're not, it's ethical, you're not doing wrong. Di ba? It's a love letter. That's how you should think about it.
Okay, so I'm just putting Jed, sorry, I clicked on you. You have a question for Sir Jerick?
Yes. Hi. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for uh, your lectures. I learned a lot today. So my question would be, because coming from, I'm very used to like the qualitative and quantitative research. I think for me, I just need to know like how do you like is it like similar to doing this type of like practice-led, practice-based research? Like how do I like get away from that kind of research, or do I like bring like does it transition? I mean, can it like transition from that research to creative research? Like
Okay. I think Jen, kaya di ba, we actually, I think that the part where I said that, you know, the difference between practice-based research and pure practice is that's, I think that's where the answer is. Because when you know when it's pure practice, so we're trying to find out how to do something, but that's just for us. It doesn't really kumbaga, doesn't really have to involve anybody else. But when you move into research, when you move into practice-based research, then you have to somehow be able to transfer that to other people. But and that you know, within the context, I guess, of a capstone program, yun para bang paano yung the things that you've learned inside your practice, how do you now kumbaga, create a document so that when other people read it, they can, you know, try out your practice. Parang yun, di ba? Parang I think that's it. I think that that's how you can transition from just really making and figuring out what you're making into, you know, doing research on what you're making. So again, you need to document it. You need to find out what has been written about this topic, what has been written about this technique, who has used this technique in the past, diba? So that now becomes not just practice, not just making something for the sake of making something, but it becomes now, you know, material for legitimate research.
okay, thank you, sir.
So was that all right? Thanks.
Yeah, I made it clear. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jed. So another question, sir. So what are the common challenges encountered in practice-based research in the creative arts field here in the Philippines?
Oh my gosh. Well, number one challenge that is, you know, people, when people think, when the person doing the research is not a scientist, like any research, yeah, that's really no. This is research. I'm trying to find out something. It's my method is systematic and it'll benefit other people. This is research. But sa akin, one of the challenges that I had was materials. Because, you know, parang again, when you're doing research, when you're reviewing the literature, the things that have been made, or you hear about all these materials na ginamit ng mga artists sa ibang lugar, and then pag hinanap mo siya dito, wala. Diba? And that's yun. And so now, I guess that what I did there was that, you know, I studied the material. And then I studied the properties of the material. Again, you go back to your irreducibles, right? And you study the material, and then, okay, so what can I substitute that material with that is locally available? Yun. For my negatives, I actually used, alam niyo yung clear acetate. Actually, just ordinary clear acetate. Nabili ko from National Bookstore. Meron kasing material sa US na kumakapit yung ink talaga. It's like an acetate material na talagang you draw on it and it'll, you know, ink will stick. Wala tayo nandito. So I had to find a way to napadikitin yung ink onto that acetate material. And I found this, yung material na ginagamit na pang laser printer siya. pero clear acetate. So I figured that that actually kumbaga hindi nabubura yung ink. Of course merong problems kasi that kind of material pag nabasa mabubura yung image. So you cannot make mistakes. So again, these are the things it's going to be unique for every project, for every research, but and this is now how you get creative with stuff. So really, material would be it. Material, if there was a top hurdle, it's material, because the material that you may want, the best material may not be available, or it may be very expensive. Because I can order that material from the US, pero wow, medyo mahal siya. So yung cost, just get creative. Don't let that stop you. Find out how the material works, and then look for an alternative.
Okay, sir, si Miss Trina has a question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good afternoon. Actually, sir, I'd just like to add to Sir Jeric's advice to the students regarding how to start a practice-based or practice-led research. Kasi right now, I'm taking my master's in anthropology. So coming from a design-focused background to a social science, I was really intimidated kasi we have to make papers, ganyan, research. So yun din, I grappled din with the question na ano nga bang i-research ko? So I took this subject, biological anthropology, which is about DNA and evolution. Tapos we had to create a paper. So for me, syempre, bukal sa loob ko or hindi masama sa loob ko na to create the paper so that I have to connect it to my practice, which is fashion design. So ang topic of my paper came from, kasi I was a footwear designer for so many years sa retail. And then meron kaming observation before na very casual, na bakit ganun? Yung laging buwebenta na size ng paa is size 7, size 6. Okay, and then when we started our own brand, ito nationwide yung 6 and 7. Then we started our own brand. Nagbebenta kami sa Makati. Tapos ang nauubos sa amin, 8 tsaka 9. So parang kami, meron, doon nag-start yung inquiry ko na bakit gano'n? Parang pagmayaman lang ba yung 8 and 9? Bakit average yung 6 and 7? So that was my starting point. Yun yung point of inquiry ko nga, sir. Di ba pag when you approach research, ano ba yung, so, tsaka something to add to the conversation. So, I connected that to, yun nga, sa evolution, sa biological studies. So, from my research, meron nga mga studies nga ng stature, yun na usually yung mga nasa urban areas, sila, because of access to food and water. So, kaya kumbaga mas malalaki yung built nila than opposed to those na nakatira sa, sabihin natin, hindi naman provincial areas, pero hindi, or rural areas. So for my paper, I had to, qualitative yung ginawa ko. Kasi since it is about foot sizes, so I had to do a survey of 100 people, although I started with women, na foot sizes. So, mineasure ko lahat. And then, in fairness so I have a data na yung sample size ko na yun na it proved na yung mga nasa urban areas, mas malalaki talaga yung paa nila as opposed to those na nasa rural area. Talagang nasa 8, 9 yung niya. So, and then, I noticed or I realized din na yung practice-led research can also, parang pwede siya manganak into practice-based. Kasi yung data mo for that, you can also use for your creative practice or as a designer. So, yun lang, sir. So, kaya nyo rin yan, guys. That's what I can say.
Yes, great input. I think go ahead, sir.
Sige, ma'am. No, I think one thing that I must emphasize is that if you don't know what you want to do research on at this point, don't worry. Diba? Just keep moving forward. Diba? You know, I didn't know, again, you know, I didn't know I was going to kumbaga, figure out what I wanted to do with my research nung nagpunta ako ng Seoul. Diba? Nagkataon lang talaga na, oh, yun, may exhibit si Sugimoto din. I went and boom. Diba? I came home, I had an idea. Diba? Pero when I went there, gusto ko lang magbakasyon. Diba? I wasn't thinking research. But it came to me. It came to me. And so yeah. And really, if you already have, you don't start research with something that is finished. Na meron ka ng material, tapos bigla i-research mo, paatras, reverse research. No. So you really come into it with uncertainty. And it is really a journey of discovery. So if you're not, one of my favorite lines, quotable from me talaga, if you're not suffering, it's not a research. Really. If you're not suffering, it's not a research.
Tama yan, sir. Okay, our next question is, how do you know, sir, when your research is sufficient? Apart from when you're not suffering.
I think, okay, you will know because it has answered your inquiries. You'll know that you have reached a point where, okay, ito na, I have enough. Because it has answered, my inquiry. Okay. Actually, ang concern nga dapat is that where do you stop? Not really, nasagot ba yung tanong ko? Kasi, I have collected so many journals, I've collected so many articles, I've collected so many things to read at never ko siyang binasa. Diba? And kasi nga parang, uy, ito baka pwede itong ilagay, uy, pwede ito. Pero pag ginagawa mo na siya, nare-realize mo na, ay, hindi ko naman pala kailangan yan. Diba? And so that's it. You should also be conscious about where do you stop? Where do you stop making stuff? Remember, definitely it's going to depend on the time that you're given. Diba? We can only do research for so long or only for a period of time. And we cannot do this forever. Diba? Eventually, kailangan nyo magpasa. And so at that point, na kailangan nyo na magpasa, nasagot ba yung your basic questions? Nasagot ba yung inquiry ninyo? May gaps pa ba na kailangan nyo? And embrace the gaps because sometimes there are going to be gaps or there are going to be stuff na pwede nyo pang gawin in the future. And yeah, that's the whole point of research, diba? So that other people, even you, can actually use your own research to do more research on what you've already done. Ako, that's what I'm doing with my research now. Diba? Seeing how I can apply it elsewhere. So, mas simple na yun. Kasi nga, para bang nalatag mo na yung mga, the big stuff, you've already sorted it out. Yun.
Okay, so we have a couple more. So that question was for Krisha. Krisha, did Sir Jeric answer your question, or do you have any? Because I saw that. Okay. Okay, so the next one is from Isabel Morale. Thank you for this talk, sir. Really cool work. But I would just like to ask, how many times must our research be duplicated for it to be considered credible? It was mentioned earlier that it remains a theory unless it is duplicated. But what are the boundaries of this duplication? Because there could be variables in a certain research that make it impossible for the people outside of the direct research team to duplicate their output, like technology and research.
Okay, so good question. First of all, duplication is not your concern. Don't be concerned that people can duplicate it. If you can duplicate it, then goods na yun, diba? Again, for example, I don't need other people to make 70 more images to know that my research is valid, because I was able to make 17 images. So dapat yun pa lang is already proof that my method works. Diba? So then, of course, the next step, the people that you have to satisfy would be your panel. You know, bringing it into the whole, again, as part of the process, kailangan siyang i-present sa panel. Kailangan siyang defend sa inyong panel. And if it goes through your panel, that's all you need. Really. Diba? Yun lang yung concern nila. Hindi siya natatapos. I mean, that's another thing. Kasi parang, if you think about your research as it has an endpoint, no. You know, and that's the beauty of the practice-based research. This is about you and what you do and what you want to do for the rest of your life. So you have the opportunity to, again, duplicate the work or make the work better, etc. in the future. Pero at this stage, for this requirement, for this time, yun lang yung capstone panel mo ang kailangan mo i-satisfy with that.
I super agree. So next question, sir, slightly related from Niles Tan. Hi, sir. Thank you very much for the informative webinar. You mentioned earlier a clear distinction between what research is and what isn't. Ako din, I find that very helpful. And I have come to my senses that as a fashion design student, I often find myself doing random searches online to find inspiration in creating an output. I want to ask where and how to begin our practice-based research for us to make more meaningful outputs. Good question.
Oh yeah, it's a good question. I always recommend that you identify where you are in the traditions of whatever it is that you're doing. Diba? So if it's about fashion, nasan ka? Sino sinusundan mo? Sino yung, diba? Sino yung nauna sa'yo? And then, saan ka sumusunod? You know, for me, for example, I actually, before, and this, you know, take note that this actually changes over time. Because before, when I was starting out in photography, I was very conventional. Yeah, so I followed, you know, your typical photojournalists, documentary photographers. That's where I identified myself as the tradition that I was following. But at some point, I realized that hindi ito yung gusto kong gawin. Diba? I want to make photographic images that are not dependent on the availability of the subject or that I have to travel to a place where, you know, that I need to take photographs of. And so I began looking for other people. I began looking for other artists who were working either in the same medium or in the same topic. So sa akin, for example, one of the people I follow is Anselm Kiefer. So Anselm Kiefer is a painter, pero ang weird ng paintings niya kasi he doesn't really use oil. He used actual materials. Parang collage yung kanyang paintings. So he used to do photography, but now he's doing all this other stuff. But I follow him because of his subject matter. So his subject matter is myth. And so I'm looking at him and then figuring out how does he visualize this or that. And then, so yun yung importante rin to actually identify not just the output, you know, the aesthetics that you're trying to follow, but the methods and processes that you are subscribing to. Yun eh. So a lot of people, a lot of young creative people get trapped with aesthetics, with how something looks like. And that is it's unnecessary. Focus on how something is made. Because with aesthetics kasi, pag binago, for example, cubist ka, kapag binago mo na yung isang aesthetic ng cubism, hindi na siya cubist. Hindi ka na cubist. May identity crisis ka na ngayon. Cubist ba ako o hindi? But if your intention is, if what you follow is the methods or the philosophies of your craft, then you can, di ba, doon ka pwedeng mag-tweak. Doon ka pwedeng makahanap ng ito, this is me. Kumbaga, in the timeline of fashion, this is where I am. Diba? This, kumbaga, and yun, in the future, it is something that, you know, if you get identified with that work, definitely people who like that work will come to you for that work. Diba? And again, because ngayon, dahil kasi nga may sarili ka ng point of view, may sarili ka ng voice, and then they come to you and not to somebody else. So it's a long process, really. But that's, I think that's what you should actually aim for. And you know, again, take note that it is not creativity and creating is not a win-lose situation. I like looking at it as a head and behind situation. Sometimes I'm ahead, and sometimes I'm behind. So if I'm behind, then I need to catch up. And if I'm ahead, pwede mo na siguro ako mag-chill, di ba? Kape-kape ng konti. And then until I do another, and okay, I'm behind. Masyado na maraming kape. So I need to catch up. So yun.
Great, sir. So we'll end the question and answer with the first person to ask if she has a follow-up. So Sasa again said, "Sir, I came from a scientific community and I have just learned about today's practice-led and practice-based research because I am used to qualitative and quantitative research. Thank you for the very informative talk. My follow-up question is, what are the measurements or tools used in creative research to reject or accept hypotheses, or in case narratives, what you evaluate or research?"
Okay, good question. Good question. So in practice-based research, you actually have ano ba? Well, ako, based on the conceptual framework that I showed you, di ba? Yun dapat yung yun yung measurements, yun yung primary measurements, because that's where your research actually revolves. Di ba? Ano yung independent variable, ano yung dependent variable, the moderator and the mediator variables, and the other variables. Di ba? So that is your first checkpoint. Di ba? Are you satisfying the requirements of the variables? Di ba? So that is your first checkpoint. The second checkpoint, and this is now with regard to the final project, the final output, are the irreducibles that I talked about. When I began this project, when I began the draw negative process, I called it syempre ang lofty it's counter photography. Yun ang pitch ko dyan dati doon sa aking advisor. Producing it because it's counter photography. And then sabi niya sa akin, well, if it's counter photography, then it's no longer photography. So you're out of photography. Di ba? Tapos parang ako, parang tama. Mali ako. So, di ba? So you have to now first identify what is irreducible in what you do. Di ba? And you have to stay in that if you want to stay kumbaga in the field of practice that you say you want to be in. Diba? Hindi ka na nang-aaway ng photography, pero gusto mong gumawa ng photographs, diba? So yun, so you have to kumbaga agency. I'd like to use the term agency. Your agency must kumbaga still fit in with the irreducibles. Because it's a game, really. I think you have to look at it as like playing a game. If you're not playing by the rules of the game, you can't play the game. And so that could be, I think, again, in terms of when you finally produce something, as I mentioned before, how do I know that it's still a skirt and it's not pants? Diba? So yun.
Yan din ang biggest learning ko, sir, ang irreducible. And with that, thank you very much. Thank you very much for today. Honestly, even for the students, we really love the questions. All of your professors are saying that you really threw amazing questions. So before we end, I just want to make one announcement, just because you guys are really rock stars today, apart from Sir Jeric, of course, who is our speaker. I will move our deadline for the deliverable to Sunday at 11:59 p.m. so that whatever learning we have today, you can still add it on to our activity 1 deadline. Okay. So before we end, let's just have, one gallery photo. Can everyone quickly turn on their camera? So I'll be taking it. I'm not so techie about this, so patience is a virtue. Okay. Okay, hold on. Okay, here we go. Smile wait lang. Wait lang. So ka ba? Okay, wait. Okay, is everyone ready? Wait, let me set this up. Smile tayo kasi ang fun today. Super proud of the questions of the students. Okay, okay, game. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next page, because we have to. Hold on, ha. Okay, smile, everyone. Okay, I think we're good. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, everyone.
Super
Thank
great
you.
session.
Miss. Thank you,
Sir
sir.
Thank you,
Jared.
Miss.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sir
Been a
Jared. We'll
pleasure.
have more projects together. Truly
Yes,
insightful.
ma'am.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, super thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Lagay
You're
natin siya
welcome,
sa
Part
waiting.
2, sir. Miss Jingay.
Oh, actually,
Miss Tal.
Oo
I'd
nga.
like to, in the future, I'd like to work siguro. Diba? Ano naman yung gagawin nila?
Oh, sige, sir.
And
That'd be
then,
nice to
sir,
see.
Tara, I also spoke to Sir Jared. You diba created our outline for the,
Yes.
for the research. Sir Jared can also give inputs para. That's the one that we can
Yeah,
have
yeah.
for the research part.
Sige,
Okay.
sir.
Thank you, sir. I know
Meron
it's
ako,
lunch.
ma'am, I have
Pasensya
a-
na. Okay, sir. Go ahead.
Meron ako, I think there's I have to create a new document for it because I just took pictures of the lecture. So I'll send that to you.
Wow.
Okay.
Mga flowchart.
Sige, sir. If you can send the presentation, we can add it as
Yes.
like sort of like a module for them. That would be really helpful. Sir, thank you for
Okay.
today. Really appreciate
Thank you,
it.
sir. Dami rin namin.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes.
Irreducibles is the word for today.
Ako din. Best learning for the day talaga.
Irreducibles.
Tinugyan na namin ni Trina yan
Oo.
Kaya irreducibles talaga is the way to go.
Parang in life, Char.
Agree.
Oo nga. Can be applied din.
So yan,
Thanks,
sir.
Miss
Thank
Babu.
you. We'll
Yes,
see you
thank you,
soon,
thank you.
sir. Super.
Yes. I'll see
Yes,
you.
sir.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you, sir.
everyone. Thank you,
Thank you,
Maku.
Bye. Thanks, Maku.
Thank you.